Neurodivergent lived experience is so much more valuable than the so-called expertise of neurotypical doctors. I said what I said and I meant it, and in this video I'm going to explain why. Hi there, welcome to Neurodivergent Magic. My name is Megan and this is the YouTube channel for accessible and relatable neurodivergent content. Now I want to start this video off with a very important caveat, which is that I am not saying doctors are stupid or useless or dumb or anything like that. I am not anti-science. I don't believe that my opinion replaces research. None of that is true. Here's what I am saying. The research is insufficient and biased. The doctors who are supposed to know about neurodivergence often don't. Doctors are often expected to know a little bit about everything rather than a deep dive on one or two specific things, and therefore they're not always super equipped to deal with neurodivergence because it's not like their area. And doctors are often better at dealing with things like disease and illness, which neurodivergence is not. So with that caveat aside, let's dive into the world of lived experience. So lived experience is basically anecdotal evidence, which you may have heard in school if you have like a science background of any kind. Anecdotes do not equal evidence. And that is somewhat true, okay? I want to grant some credence to that because the truth is, if your Aunt Susan says like, oh, well, this happened to so-and-so, that doesn't mean it's gonna happen to everybody. So anecdotes are not proof that something happens all the time that way every time. However, anecdotes, when gathered together, can create very meaningful data. Anecdotal evidence does matter and is actually very important, especially in populations where the research is lacking. And this is super apparent in the world of neurodivergence. When it comes to research about neurodivergence, it is often not very inclusive, not very neurodivergent friendly. It often doesn't come from a neurodivergent perspective. Typically, neurodivergent research comes from the lens of behaviorism, which is basically how can we make this neurodivergent person appear more neurotypical? But more on that later. Right now, let's talk about the lack of research. Because you can't tell someone that lived experience isn't good enough when the alternative, the academic research, is also not good enough. Many neurodivergent populations have been understudied or just straight up ignored, like neurodivergent people of color, neurodivergent people who are gender nonconforming, or adult neurodivergent people. These people do not make up a small percentage of neurodivergent folks. In fact, I would say we make up the majority. And we cannot rely on the research in order to receive an accurate diagnosis, to figure out accommodations, or just generally make our lives better. Because the research was never focused on us. And oftentimes the research was never focused on making our lives better either. So what do? Because we can't really go to the doctor and get reliable information from them. Even the most open-minded, well-researched doctor out there is going to have pretty severe limitations due to the nature of the research that leaves out huge swaths of people. Not to mention the undertones in much of that research that is, like I said, linked to behaviorism at best, or, at worst, related to eugenics. If you don't know, eugenics is the idea that some people are more worthy of passing on their genes than others, and there used to be a lot of belief that neurodivergent people were not overly worthy of passing on their genes, that passing on our genes was actually a bad thing. There's still very much this vibe out there, even if it's less explicit. You'll see it in things like Aspie supremacy, which is the idea that mild autism is actually a good thing and is a talent and, can be really beneficial, but severe or profound autism is a huge handicap and really should be cured if possible. That's not what we stand for here at this channel at all. Every neurodivergent person is exactly who they're supposed to be and is meant to be here and should absolutely pass on their genes if they so choose. However, a lot of neurodivergent research either explicitly advocates for a cure or has those general undertones of like, how can we make this person a little less? So we can't really turn to doctors. Even the best doctors don't really have the information they need to help us. So what do? We turn to each other, of course. The idea that you can only learn from someone if they have a formal education in that area is frankly ridiculous. This whole idea is rooted in white supremacy and capitalism, both ideas which we do not appreciate here on this channel. And I think it's really important that we start listening to each other and valuing the lived experience of neurodivergent people who actually know what it's like to be neurodivergent. Because here's the thing, analytical data, the data that's supposedly so much better than anecdotal data, is just the collection of observable anecdotes. It's just anecdotal evidence, but looked at on a bigger scale and with more rules. And I actually think that's kind of what a lot of us are doing on social media right now. We're taking our anecdotes, putting them out there, collecting the anecdotes of others, and sifting through a lot of misinformation together. TikTok gets a bad rap. You know, you see all these think pieces about like TikTok diagnoses and all this stuff, but frankly, TikTok has been way more helpful to me in figuring out my neurodivergence than most of my doctors. I'm really lucky. I have a really good team behind me now. I have a psychiatrist who has ADHD. I have a therapist who has ADHD, and they get it. But I didn't for a long time, and I was dismissed over and over and over, and it was exhausting. And my story is not unique. Most neurodivergent people take years to get diagnosed. In fact, most autistic people take over a decade to receive an accurate diagnosis. From the point they start searching for an explanation to their diagnosis, it's 11 years. That shouldn't be the case, especially when the TikTok algorithm can figure out with pretty good accuracy what's going on in a matter of weeks. Lived experience is powerful, it is helpful, and we are wrong to ignore it. So if you're ready to learn from someone who understands what it really feels like to have an autistic meltdown, or if you want to hear from somebody who has actually experienced a bipolar manic episode, or let's say you want to talk to somebody who has CPTSD and really can explain what an emotional flashback feels like in your body, I have something really powerful for you. This January 2024, I am hosting the second annual Neurodivergent Lived Experience Summit. I hosted this event last January, and it was an unbelievably powerful event full of speakers who are actually neurodivergent, presenting on their neurodivergence on tons of unique topics. This year, we have 22 speakers who represent a wide range of demographics. All kinds of races and ethnicities are represented, all kinds of gender identities are represented, and lots of different neurotypes are represented. Plus, if you attended the 2023 summit and there were a couple of speakers you wanted to see again, many of them are coming back. This event is completely free and totally virtual, so you don't need to worry about paying a dime if you don't want to. But there is a super affordable goodie bag that's available so that you can have long-term access to the replays, because, you know, this is all happening over the course of one weekend, January 5th through January 7th. And it's 22 speakers. There's a lot of presentations, so you're probably not going to catch them all. But if you want long-term access to the replays, you can buy the super affordable goodie bag, which also comes with over $300 worth of goodies that were donated by our very generous speakers. So if you're sick of doctors who simply do not get it, and you are ready to learn from people who have actually been in your shoes, I really encourage you to come to the Neurodivergent Lived Experience Summit. You can go ahead and grab your completely free ticket at the link in the description, and I will see you tomorrow.